So, a lot of people talk about social skill learning in classes and stuff, and I find these goals are sometimes very ableist, upsetting, and just plain weird. Like, they'll be like, understand other people. And they talk about, like, this kid needs to show understanding of other people, or some really, really broad goal. This kid will understand boundaries and respect boundaries. They'll understand themselves and stuff. Well, the problem with these things is many adults don't. Yet you expect a 5-year-old to understand everything? I mean, adults all the time invade other people's boundaries or don't know their own boundaries. Develop good communication skills. A lot of adults don't have it. And we're still learning. I'm still learning about myself. A lot of times I'm still learning about my own healthy boundaries. I'm still learning how to communicate better. There's so much about myself that I'm still learning that expecting just making a goal and saying it's done and over with. Well, what I think is actually going on is that you think it's over with because they're acting normal, instead of admitting that the world is actually really complicated and you don't see it because you cannot reflect on your own inadequacies and own problems with yourself, especially neurotypical people. And a lot of these goals then turn out to have problems. For if I go through all this on this web, just looking at social skill goals, I could probably find one with all of them. But sailing, sailing isn't always good. I mean, I'm not just talking about like sailing stuff like TMI, too much information or inappropriate things, but it can be that you give a lot of people with unhealthy boundaries give up way too much and get taken advantage of, and they can be pushing person. And it can be really hard to tell how important something is for that individual child. Maybe it looks like a stuffed animal to you, but to them it has a ton of sentimental value. Another kid could ruin it or hurt it. Maybe they need it for emotional regulation. Maybe they don't want to share food because they have hunger or something like that. And if you just say sharing in general, you can push them too hard in one direction. Cooperating. Well, sometimes you just have to. Sometimes cooperating just means being subservient or going down to people. And guess what? Who has to make the most sacrifices using the system? The person that's not normal, or the person that it has bigotry against them, is the one that's deemed uncooperative because they're not cooperating in society or to what the people in charge say. Listening. Listening in some ways is a good goal, but there are things that get away with listening that we have to recognize. You could have auditory processing disorder where your brain just can't really process stuff. You might be having a meltdown when you can't think or something like that. Following directions. Why people these days just follow directions without questioning all the freaking time, and it really leads to people oppressing people because someone just gave them orders. It leads to a system that doesn't change for the better. It leads to people not thinking about how to improve things. So you shouldn't just follow directions. And sometimes a reason why a person's not following directions, again, is because they can't. Or it's really hard for them. Maybe they have a physical disability that's not diagnosed, and I've seen this over again. Maybe they can't follow directions because they don't have the executive function for it, or some other problem that you're just all outright missing. Respecting personal space. That's a pretty good one, but it takes time for it to be seen, and it takes time to learn. The next one, making eye contact, is just a horrible one out there. I'm just going to put it out there. Making eye contact. First of all, a lot of autistic people and other people cannot think and talk well while making eye contact, and they have to fake it, and that's draining and takes brain power to them, and they cannot listen as well. It's nervous and racking, and beyond that, do we need to make eye contact to hear someone else? No, you do not need to make eye contact to hear someone else. We listen to people on the phone all the time, radio, YouTube. People will be in front of us talking over speakers. People will be taking notes, and they won't be listening. Okay, it's a sign that they're listening, blah blah. but not really. People can make eye contact on the other hand and totally not be listening and just nodding heads and pretending. So it's not a good sign. It totally gives false impressions, and this means they start judging people based on eye contact. You think people are listening to you that are not, and you think they're more respectful when they're really disrespectful and stuff, or you think they got your message when they didn't, and you don't ask follow-up questions. On the other hand, you think the exact opposite with people not making eye contact. You start gaslighting and maybe at times, or you start saying that they're not listening, or all these other things. Using manners. It depends on a lot of the context, what is good or bad. But what is, I believe, real social skills to teach kids? Well, first one is learning about themselves, which is a lifelong journey. But if you learn about your own limits and boundaries, you can know what's healthy for you. And you might, for different people, they might need to share different amount of things. For some people, it might be more or less. If they can know about themselves, they can know what makes them happy, what makes them sad. And they can also start understanding others' people better. The way you promote this is maybe more talking, or in other ways communicating about like how you're feeling, but not with a lot of pressure. Sometimes people do not know how they're feeling. Talking about your own feelings and emotions and stuff, but not in a way to make them feel same, just honest, and so they can start complimenting you and see themselves in you, and you can start discussing your emotions back and forth, or not only emotions, feelings, thoughts, just how you think and everything. So talking that way. But again, that's a hard thing to measure at all because it's such an abstract concept that's even really, really important. Another thing you could do is learning how to set boundaries. And setting boundaries is letting kids set boundaries. And there's a lot of things you can do with this. For example, do not force, never touch a person, even a kid, if you can. I mean, it's different with a baby, obviously, but never touch, or medical thing, never touch a person without their permission. Includes giving hugs and handshakes to kids. So they learn that you need permission and consent. Don't boss around how they dress. Just talk to them unless it's like a real health concern, like they're going to go out in the cold and freeze to death, or something like that. But talk to them. Ask them for consent for some stuff. So they learn to ask for consent to other people and learn their own boundaries and that their boundaries are important. We tell kids to not pass people's clothing around, yet we do it to themselves. So we send mixed messages, and this promotes directly cultures that might get me demonetized. Another thing about how to teach boundaries is, this also teaches boundaries with other people, respecting boundaries with other people, is also clearly tell them when you're past your limit or something like that. Just be clear and talk about other people and how they need to have boundaries too, and communicate. And they might not get until they're much older, the first time or the third time, and maybe it takes thousands of times, but slowly stuff sinks in, even if they don't seem like they're listening, because it takes time. Another one is beyond the boundary setting and respecting other people's boundaries, is teach them about the world and how there's a lot of diversity in the world of types of people and how people think, and discuss it. But discussing the world and how people think and talking about it, it's very different than telling them to conform. Because one thing is you might talk about how messed up the world is. That doesn't mean they should conform to a messed up world. Because you're saying the world's messed up. Don't do this. So talk about the world. And honestly, people just do not talk about the world enough. And I think those are the real skills that we should be teaching. But we don't, and we don't know how to. And honestly, there's no good way of measuring any of those things, and it's a lifelong journey. That if we promote the right communication attitude, people will do a well in adulthood doing it. Well, thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out.